Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for this session. My name is Spencer Allingham, and I'm the Technical Director at Condusiv for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Today, I want to cover one of the most overlooked causes of performance loss when running virtual Windows servers in VMware, and more importantly, how you can easily fix the problem by installing our V-locity software on all of your Windows VMs. I'll have a Q&A session at the end, so if you think of any questions as we're going through, please do feel free to put them in the questions box in the GoToMeeting window, and I will do my very best to answer them all at the end. So with that said, let's get on with the presentation. Now, some of you may be thinking, goodness, I've never heard of Condusiv. Who are they? Well, we're actually a 38-year-old software company. I think the 12th oldest software company in the world that's still going strong today. And as mentioned, I want to introduce you to our V-locity software, which is our patented storage I/O sequentialization and RAM caching technology that eliminates performance problems in virtual environments. Now, some of our software is OEM'd by some of the biggest players in the IT industry, and I'm sure you recognize the likes of Samsung, Fujitsu, HP, and so on. We've actually sold over 100 million licenses worldwide and have a 90% footprint in the Fortune 500. So that's a little bit about us. Our V-locity software has also been available for many years now and is itself used by thousands of organizations all around the world, from small companies to large multinational enterprises, universities, hospitals, government agencies, and so on. Anyway, enough about us. Let's talk a bit about why you might want to consider taking a closer look at our V-locity software for your VMware environment. Badly performing VMware virtual machines can manifest in a number of different ways. You could, for example, have batch jobs or reports taking longer than they should, slow databases that can't process enough transactions per minute or per hour, applications that are taking longer than they should to respond. You might even have application timeouts, user complaints to the help desk, or even worse, customer complaints. As we rely more and more on our virtualized infrastructures, we really can't accept a situation where we're unable to get all of the performance that we've paid for when setting up our VMware environments. As IT professionals, we really need to ensure that the maximum compute is available at all times, and especially during periods of peak load, and even more especially during the working day when users are more likely to be at work using our VMware environments. If you're seeing performance issues within your VMware environment, there could be several causes. One of the most common when running Windows in VMware virtual machines is related to the way Windows moves data to and from the storage layer. Generally, it's really not as efficient as it could be. Now, we've had customers such as the University of Illinois over in the US purchase the V-locity software even after buying very expensive all-flash arrays, simply because they still needed more performance. Others have been able to defer the purchase of that expensive next level storage simply because V-locity gave them so much more performance from the storage array that they already owned. The good news is that you can easily get better storage performance too, simply by installing our V-locity software on all your virtual machines. Not only will that deal with the inefficiencies in Windows, it will also introduce intelligent RAM caching for your read I/O traffic. Now, before we can take a closer look at the V-locity software and how it works, it's important to understand what type of storage I/O traffic performs best with pretty much all types of storage that could underpin a VMware environment, from spinning platter hard drives right up to flash or SSDs. There's a very good reason why storage manufacturers prefer to measure the performance of their storage with larger sequential reads and writes. And that is that this type of storage I/O traffic allows a faster data transfer rate, measurable in megabytes or gigabytes per second. Basically, larger sequential storage transfers mean a faster data transfer rate, and that in turn means better performance for the workloads that you're running in your VMware environment. Take a look at the test results on this slide for an NVMe connected SSD and a spinning hard drive. Of course, the reads and writes are faster on the SSD, no surprises there, of course, but what about when the storage I/O sizes are small? Smaller storage I/Os mean less data can be read and written per second. And that's okay, I guess, if you're actually reading or writing only 2K or 4K of data. But, and this is an important but, what many people don't realize is that the Windows operating system inside your virtual machines will often take a larger write and will split it in the background into many more, much smaller I/Os as it sends the data out to the storage. The net effect, of course, is that data is written more slowly. And this can also slow down the speed at which that data can be read later on. It can have a very real and very negative performance effect on storage-heavy virtualized workloads like SQL and other databases, busy file servers, business information systems, ERP systems, document management systems, and so on. You know, how often have users complained about performance? Traditionally, as IT professionals, we're taught that bad performance is combated by buying more expensive storage hardware, faster switches, and so on. But what many IT professionals don't realize is that the Windows operating system itself can actually be tuned to prevent or avoid the slower data transfer rates that these split I/O situations cause. The easiest way, of course, is just by simply installing the V-locity software on all of the Windows VMs. And I should mention that installing V-locity to all of your VMs will only take a few minutes of your time, and it won't cause any disruption at all to the running workloads. There are no reboots required to make it work, no complicated configuration. You just install the software. It really is that simple. And for those who have a larger number of VMs, V-locity comes with a management console, which you can choose to use or not, it's up to you. But if you use that, you can then push install the software across your network, again, in just a matter of minutes. In addition to sequentializing storage I/O traffic for greater throughput of data, V-locity also provides an intelligent RAM cache that will allow your applications to be served hot reads at the speed of RAM instead of the speed of the disk storage layer and the network connecting it to the servers. When you consider that server-side RAM is roughly 10 times faster than most SSD storage, you can see how that would also be beneficial to the performance of the workloads that you're running in those Windows VMs. Basically, it gets requested data to the applications more quickly, and at the same time, your storage layer is working less hard because it has fewer read I/Os to deal with. The cache size is automatic and dynamically sized, and V-locity will never compete for RAM with anything else you have running on a VM. It will only ever use some of the memory that's being left idle or unused. And because the cache is sitting inside each Windows VM, it provides the shortest I/O path possible to get those read I/Os completed as quickly as possible. By installing V-locity on all of your Windows virtual machines, you'll quickly change from this situation where you have small storage traffic that gets further randomized by a blender effect as it passes through the physical host, to this, where the storage traffic is much more sequential, so that you can now actually get Finally, the performance that you paid for when purchasing your VMware environment and its associated hardware. Even if you have the fastest storage array in the world, does it really make sense to allow the virtualized Windows OS to split storage I/O traffic, dampen its performance, and really prevent you from using it to its full potential? Now, I mentioned earlier that we have thousands of V-locity customers all over the world. We also have quite a few customer case studies available to read on our website at condusiv.com. Bell Mobility is a great example, just down there on the bottom left. They're a telecoms company in Canada who installed our V-locity software, which promptly replaced their small random storage I/O traffic with larger sequentialized reads and writes. And this gave them SQL report queries that were 3 times faster. No additional hardware required. All they had to do was install the V-locity software on all their VMs, no reboots, no SQL code changes, and no disruption. Just quite simply the ability to process more work in the same amount of time. Another great example is Hancock Regional Hospital on the bottom right. After installing V-locity on all their VMs, they found immediately their patient records loading 3 times faster. So let me briefly summarize what we've been through. Firstly, small random reads and writes to storage mean less data can be transferred each second, and that can be very bad for the Windows OS, application performance, and basically your VMware virtualization initiative. It can bottleneck the virtual environment, leading to less productivity and more user or customer complaints. Secondly, V-locity solves performance problems in VMware virtual environments by sequentializing writes as data is being written for greater transfer rates, more throughput, and it introduces RAM caching to really boost storage-hungry applications like SQL, SharePoint, on-prem Sage ERP, Microsoft Dynamics, busy file servers, and many more. And finally, V-locity is just software, so it can be installed in any Windows VM being hosted in a VMware environment. As long as you have Windows VMs running Windows Server 2008 R2 or later, or Windows 7 or later, you can install V-locity, and as I mentioned, there are no code changes required, no reboots, and no disruption to live running workloads or your users. If you want to try the V-locity software for yourself, you can actually download a copy free right now. In fact, rather than take my word for any of this, I would much rather you install it on all of your VMs and see what difference it can make to your own virtual environment with your real-world hardware, your real-world workloads that you're running. Just though, as a couple of tips from someone who's installed this software in many customer environments, I would suggest that it's worth waiting 24 to 48 hours after installation to check the results. That basically will give V-locity's telemetry algorithms a chance to learn a bit about the workloads you're running in each machine and start figuring out what the hot blocks of data are that should be in the RAM cache. Also, try to leave enough RAM free to cache with effectively, especially on your more important, busy or VIP servers. Now, if you can leave 16 gig of RAM free, that should be enough to, well, really make the performance fly. But if you can't afford that, leave 8 gig free. And if you can't afford 8 gig, leave 4 gig free. Even that is enough to make a difference. But if you start going much smaller than that, you'll probably be limiting the results that you would otherwise get. So I hope that helps in terms of sizing. If you want to get technical help with the software, simply get the Condusiv contact details for your region from the Contact Us page at condusiv.com. Let us know, and we can quickly get you hooked up with a technical engineer to help with things like installation, configuring for best results, and even evaluating the results with you. Yeah, we'll help you as much or as little as you feel appropriate. Just let us know. And to say thank you for your time today and for your interest in the Velocity software, we're going to send you a single full Velocity server license worth £400 along with the 30-day trialware. And that's yours to keep running on one of your machines even after the 30-day trialware has expired. I would strongly recommend, though, that it's worth installing the Velocity trialware on all of your virtual machines when testing to be able to see the full power of the software. That way you're positively affecting the most storage IO traffic possible, rather than the storage traffic just on one or two machines. So with that being said, I hope that makes sense. Let's see if we have had any questions come through. So Subash says, is Velocity installed on the host and the VMs? Great question. In fact, I have a little diagram here which shows exactly where our software sits. So this is a rough, probably overcomplicated diagram of a virtual environment. That you can see here, we have our hypervisor sitting in the physical host. So this would be your VMware ESX or ESXi server, and it's hosting this Windows virtual machine. And as you can see, Velocity is just installed as any other piece of software would be into the Windows operating system itself. You don't install anything down at the host or hypervisor layer. We don't need to hook anything here to make it work, and we don't need to hook anything down here at the storage layer either. By installing up at this high layer, it means that we can operate as close as it's possible to get to the applications that you're running that are requesting reads and writes of data. So for example, that's how our RAM cache sitting up here can provide the shortest IO path to get those hot reads back to the application. But more importantly, it means that by operating here in the virtual Windows VM, we can actually be hypervisor agnostic. So we don't really care what the hypervisor is, though I know that this session is very much focused around VMware, but you might also be using Hyper-V or Citrix Zen Server or KVM running over Red Hat. It really doesn't matter. As long as the hypervisor technology and the backend storage is compatible with the Windows OS running up here, then it is going to be compatible with our software. So I hope that answers that question. Let's see if we have any other questions that have come through. Now, Christopher says, are the benefits equally realized within VDI workstation environments? That's a great question. Thank you, Christopher. Usually, yes. And it will usually benefit pretty much any Windows-based workload, including VDIs, which can often fall foul of things like IO storms at particular times of the day. For example, if you've got all of your users turning up at 9 o'clock and all logging on and then opening up Outlook and sort of picking up their email and all that sort of stuff, you've suddenly got quite a burst of storage IO traffic hitting the back-end storage. Now, what our software would do is typically reduce the storage IO workload by, well, I guess a customer average is somewhere between 30 to 50%. So immediately you're lessening the amount of work that the back-end storage has to do. You're satisfying a good percentage of those reads from RAM instead. And overall, yeah, the VDI workstation environment is going to benefit from that. I'm not going to sort of sit here and say that this is a silver bullet for all types of situations, because as an engineer, that would be very foolish. For example, if you've got something like a DHCP server that's really not generating a lot of storage traffic, we're probably not going to set the world alight on that machine. But where you have things like VDI environments or busy database servers or SharePoint or file servers, these type of workloads that are using the storage a lot, that's really where you're going to see the most benefit from using this type of software. So Christopher, I hope that answers that question adequately. Let's see if any other questions have come through. Simon asks, is it safe to use with SQL Server? Yes, it is. Another great question. In fact, all of our software is actually certified by Microsoft themselves, every version before it gets released to the public. And in fact, Microsoft actually sign the filter drivers that we use as part of our software for us. And we've been a Microsoft Gold partner since, goodness, the mid-90s, when they bought out Windows NT version 4. So a good long time. And specifically to answer your question about SQL Server, we actually have specific certification from Microsoft for running our Velocity 7 software with SQL Server 2016. We got together with Microsoft engineers and we ran tests with, of course, SQL in their Azure cloud. And not only were we able to jump through all of the hoops required for Microsoft to provide us with the certification, at the same time, we were able to show that the number of SQL transactions that could be processed per minute or per hour increased by almost 30% straight out of the box. So I hope that answers that question. Dietmar says, does the software respect transaction safety, flush to disk for databases? Yes, another great question. It absolutely does. In fact, it's completely ACID compliant. Our software is not actually touching the contents of a storage IO packet directly at all. It's not trying to do anything clever like dedupe on the fly or any compression or anything like that. What it's actually doing is using a very thin storage filter driver to provide an extra layer of intelligence to the Windows write driver so that it can make better choices about how and where to size and put that write. So it's still the standard NTFS write driver, creating a standard NTFS storage IO packet and sending it on down the stack to the storage. So yes, absolutely compatible, and it does respect the transaction safety. You're not going to have any kind of problems with that at all. Now, let's see if we have any other questions come through. So David says, did you run the Atto disk benchmark test with and without Velocity so that we can see the difference? Now, I figured that this question would come up. And actually, yes, I did. Now, let me find where I've put that. Here we go. Here we go. Let's put this here. Here we go. Now, I didn't actually include these slides as part of the main presentation, basically because I felt it was unrealistic in a real world environment outside of a lab test to expect that all of the read IO traffic would be satisfied by Velocity's RAM cache, as of course is the case with this lab test and these sets of results. However, if you could satisfy just 25% or more of the hot reads at a transfer rate measured in gigabytes per second rather than megabytes per second, really that can only be beneficial to the Windows OS and application performance. It would also mean that those read IOs satisfied from cache represent less work for the storage layer. Now, without Velocity, the read transfer rate of the NVMe connected SSD, which is this column here, it was maxing out at around about 3.2 gigabytes per second. Significantly more when Velocity's RAM cache was working. The read transfer rate of the spinning hard drive was maxing out at around about 224 megabytes per second. With Velocity satisfying all the read IO traffic at the speed of RAM, the read transfer rate now maxes out easily at over 11 gigabytes per second. So the cached reads are being served up more than 3 times faster than the NVMe connected SSD could do by itself, actually over both storage types. if you have any kind of storage bottleneck in your VMware environment, that RAM caching has to be good news. It's very beneficial to things like SQL or other types of databases. As I mentioned before, busy file servers, ERP systems, document management systems, CRM systems. We've got a lot of people using it who are running things like ERP. Some of you may be using Sage, typically on-prem rather than in the cloud. But if you're running Windows VMs in the cloud as well, this technology still works and it's still compatible. So I hope that answers that question. Let's see if we've had any others come through. Now, I think we've got one more through, and that's from George. And he says, is a Linux version available or is it just for Windows? Good question. I'm afraid it's just for Windows VMs. Now, we do have a version for Linux that's on our roadmap, but I don't know at this stage when that's likely to be released to the public. So right now it is just for Windows VMs. Now, that being said, if you've got a mixed environment, let's say you've got one or more ESXi hosts, and you've got a number of Windows machines, and you've got a number of Linux VMs as well, and they're all sharing the same backend storage. If you can reduce 30 to 50% or more of that storage IO traffic from the Windows part of the estate, from the storage point of view, what you're doing is reducing storage IO queue depths, reducing storage latency, and the Linux part of the estate will be able to take advantage of all of that additional IO headroom that's been handed back to the environment by default. So I hope that answers that. Dietmar has said again, as a developer, do we expect compile times of large batch compiles to improve? That's a good question. And it really depends, Dietmar, on how much storage IO traffic is being done during those compiles. I know a lot of compiles can be perhaps a lot more CPU intensive, but if you've got periods of time where you're having to read and write lots of data to and from the storage during those compiles, well, yes, it's very possible that they would improve. The best way to answer that question really is to grab a copy of the software, which you're going to be sent very shortly, and try it. See for yourself if it's going to affect the type of compiles that you are doing. So I know that's probably not the best answer I can give, but I hope that helps, Dietmar, and I hope that makes sense. Okay, let's see. I think that's all of the questions. Dietmar says that's fine. Okay, good. I hope you try it, and I hope it works for you. And listen, if you want any help with this, and this is not just for you, Dietmar, but this is for everybody listening, genuinely, if you want any help getting it installed, setting it up, running tests, evaluating the results, you're very welcome to reach out to us and speak with a proper technical engineer. We're not going to start hassling you with sales reps or anything like that. We want to make sure that you try the software and that it's actually going to provide you value before we get to that point. So please feel free to get that contact us page on our website at condusiv.com. We can quickly get you hooked up with an engineer like myself to help you with all of that. And yeah, if it looks like it is going to provide value and it's going to work well for you, well, then of course we can provide you with quotations and get you in touch with either a sales rep or your preferred channel partner. We do prefer a channel first approach. So if you have a preferred software provider, we're very happy to work with them too. We can provide volume discount licensing. So if you need to buy a large number of licenses, we can give you a better price. We also offer discounts for government, academic, charity organizations, and so on. So if you get to the point where this does look like something that's going to provide value to you, then definitely reach out to one of us so that we can make sure that we're providing you with the very best price, the most economic way to get this software for your particular setup. So with that said, thank you very much, everybody, for spending some time with me today. I hope it's been interesting, and I hope I've been able to answer all of the questions. You're very welcome to email me after the session. My email address is, in fact, let me put that in the chat box here so that you'll have it. My email address is sallingham@condusiv.co.uk. There we go. If you want to email me afterwards, just copy and paste that and make a note of that. I'll be more than happy to continue any discussions as you see fit. So thank you everyone again for joining me. Have a very good rest of day. And yeah, I look forward to speaking with you soon. Take care, everyone. Cheers.